didn't know what a slave is until they told me to work a long hour without food or pay. Now I know. I am a child.
In Kenya, a new school day starts. Raising their national flag, the children take pride in their school and their country.
1 + 6. 7.
As well as knowledge, their lessons give them confidence and new horizons.
6 + 5.
But these pupils are lucky, the exception rather than the rule.
6 + 1. 7. 1 + 2.
Their school is in Nyeri province, the heart of Kenya's tea and coffee growing region. Too many children here learn about production the hard way, as child labourers. The hours are long and the work tough. But plantation managers like child workers because their fingers are nimble and quick.
They are active, you know, they are young, they are active. These are the best people for this work because it requires people with speed. It requires speed because you have to track maximum. They start when they are very young, before they start schooling. So they start schooling at the age of 4, and by the age of 3, the child is able to move. When the climate is favorable, the mother goes with he or she to the field, or maybe the father. You know, it's a tough work, but as one grows, you usually comes to realize that though it's a tough work, it's of use. Yeah, it's profitable. But you know, something profitable, obviously you expect it to be a little bit tough. Yeah. Yes.
When profit is the bottom line, child labour makes good economic sense. Children are cheap, they are easy to control, they don't form trade unions, and there is a constant supply of new workers. In the world of the poor, the children must work as hard as adults because their families need their wages to survive. Every day, labour pushes them further away from childhood and into shouldering prematurely the burden of adulthood. By the age of 8, some have begun a lifetime sentence of hard labour for the crime of poverty. Few human rights abuses are so unanimously condemned while being so widely practiced as child labour. No region of the world today, including richer industrialised countries, is entirely free of child labour. Laws preventing child labour abound the world over, but legislation alone cannot achieve a great deal if the issue is treated with a fatalistic attitude and regarded as an inevitable companion to poverty. Poverty, as many acknowledge, cannot be a blanket excuse for child exploitation. Millions of children worldwide continue to sweat their lives away in factories, fields, mines, quarries and workshops. They are some of the world's most disadvantaged people, growing old before they understand that their childhood has gone.
Ce problème du travail des enfants est lié essentiellement à la grande pauvreté.
This problem of child labour is linked essentially to extreme poverty, poverty which is affecting more and more developing countries.
Il faut que nos pays riches du Nord comprennent.
The rich industrialised countries have to understand that it's by helping the developing countries tackle the problems of underdevelopment that they can ultimately get out of the poverty trap, and in so doing, stop child labour.
Et parmi ces problèmes, au problème du travail des enfants.
In the cathedral town of Canterbury at the University of Kent, Hugh Cunningham lectures in social history. He's written extensively on child labour.
The attempts to reduce child labour are very much a phenomenon of recent times. The situation was until the late 18th, early 19th century that everyone assumed that children would go to work at a relatively early age and contribute to the family economy. This book here shows some of the evidence which was being produced by the British government in the 1840s. This was a report which was set up by Lord Shaftesbury, the evangelical reformer, who became concerned about children in mines. And this report led to the 1842 Act, which made it illegal for children to work in mines under the age of 10. This picture shows 3 children pulling the coal after it's been cut out by the adult male miner nearer to the surface. One of the reasons children are employed here is because the seam is very narrow, and that was one of the reasons they said they used children for this. The pictures here, which led very immediately to an Act of Parliament, which made it illegal for these children to work underground in the mines.
Shaftesbury's pioneering opposition to child labour was taken up by popular 19th century authors like Charles Dickens and Benjamin Disraeli. But despite their fierce criticism, the Industrial Revolution in Europe and North America condemned millions of underaged workers to appalling conditions: long hours, sweatshop situations, noise, heat and dust. Industrialisation drove children out of the fields and into factories, subjecting them to working hours and conditions previously unknown.
And certainly you would find, for example, the British Prime Minister, William Pitt, in 1796, saying that he thought experience showed that putting children to work as early as possible in manufactures worked to their own advantage. And when he said that, he meant children at the age of 4. John Locke, a century earlier, had said that you should have a working school in every parish for children from the age of 3.
But slowly the message of labour reformers began to have an effect. Faced with graphic evidence, public opinion started to turn, and child labour became one of the major issues of the time. Child labour legislation and enforcement measures were established by many countries under the conviction that they are the first step to tackling child exploitation. In 1919, the newly founded International Labour Organization adopted its first international convention, regulating child labour in factories. Further ILO standards reinforced the political commitment of many governments to achieve the total abolition of child labour. A whole new set of beliefs began to gain ground.
I think it starts with some doctors looking at the health of children in factories, and they can see that these children are not only liable to get certain diseases, but that their height and weight is less than that of children who work in agriculture. And they become concerned about what you might call the reproduction of the race. They think that if you go on putting children to work early, they will grow up stunted, and that will have implications for future generations. So they begin to think it may be necessary to take children out of the labour market for the reproduction of society and the race. But alongside that, you get something which seems to me quite new. You get people saying that childhood should not be a time for work. A child who's working has lost his or her childhood. It's a belief that childhood should be the happiest time of your life, a quite new idea, and that it should be spent ideally in the countryside, and it should be protected, and that really, in a sense, life is downhill after you've ended childhood. Now, if you hold that belief, then the kind of conditions children were enduring in the factories and in the mines were a total contradiction of childhood.
In the coffee and tea estates of Kenya, work to stop child labour continues. Every day, in an effort to parallel national legislation, members of a voluntary group try to persuade the workers that their children are better off in school than at work. Sometimes the plantation owners support them, sometimes not. In many rural areas, laws governing child labour seem to stop at the fence of the plantation.
This child is is a child of one of the pickers, and as you can see, this coffee is freshly sprayed with chemicals. So you wonder how a child who is only 7 months old can survive going through the chemicals that you can see on the coffee. Now, our program is trying to rehabilitate those children. First of all, to convince the parents that it's not good for the young children to work. And secondly, for those ones who have dropped out of school, to find out ways and means of sending them back to school so that they can grow properly and be educated properly.
We have coffee, tea.
The volunteers are making progress. More than 100 plantation children now attend school. In return, their parents get a small amount of money to compensate for the lost wages.
The feeling that gets into my heart is that these children are very happy that this program is helping them to bring them back to school and pay for their school fees, their uniforms. As you can see, they have their uniforms, and they are very happy now that they are running. They are not in the plantations where they used to work before we rehabilitated them to our program.
Despite their modest impact, such programs can have a ripple effect in stimulating governments and society on the child labour issue. Here, the children are also looked after at weekends. A recreational centre has been set up serving a number of villages. It offers meals, healthcare and basic vocational training. But most important of all, it's somewhere to meet friends and behave the way other children of their age do.
Come closer, men, women and children, from all walks of life. Come to my aid, for I want to know, why should I suffer? Why should I suffer all this?
Another school in another part of the coffee region. In a culture where gestures communicate as strongly as words, drama is being used to get the message across. A travelling theatre company is performing a play specially targeted at rural people. Choose education for your children, not work, it says. The drama isn't sophisticated, but it plays on the everyday experiences of the audience. And, as planned, it's enough to provoke heated discussion afterwards.
This is our way of making children participate, but it is also another way of making children defend themselves. The reasons, they also came up with beautiful recommendations. How about children themselves reporting situations where children are being abused? How about the children themselves actually helping their parents to help other parents who are not playing their role? So we are trying to make children become conscious on how they can actually be responsible in the society.
In Africa, as Asia and Latin America, thousands of abandoned children end up on the city streets. Homeless, they survive on their wits or through violence. The police harass them. Ordinary people fear them. Food comes from theft, begging or prostitution. Many drift into drugs or sniffing glue as an escape from the hopeless squalor of their lives. Rhoda Kiora is one of the few people in Nairobi who doesn't avoid the street children. A social worker with a voluntary group, she probably knows better than anyone else in which of the city's hidden alleys they hide.
Mami, the kind of a life that a street child has is a very hard life, difficult, because they lack almost all the necessities of life. They lack a place to sleep, they lack food, they lack clothes, they lack love.
Like me.
They lack totally everything. So they must look for those things in a hard way. Yes. And we want to ask them to comply with us so that we may assist them to become better citizens. What I tell them is that I come from, so this is one of us. Well, she was in the peace house. She disappeared yesterday. Do you want to come with me? We want to convince them that ours is to assist them so that they may have a better future, so that they may be able to take care of themselves in a better way, to live a nearer to normal life.
The results of her work are clear. At a rescue centre near Nairobi, yesterday's street children are tasting normal life again. It's just a small first step. Some children have already contracted the AIDS virus. Some may return to the streets. But for most, this is the start of something new. The role played by such voluntary groups is a key part of the international fight against child labour. But their actions cannot have a significant impact unless they're anchored in a national policy and legislative measures adopted by governments, with employers and workers' organisations joining the battle. The aim of this particular organisation is to reunite most children with their families, unless there are fears that the child will not be safe. While their futures are being decided, the children get a basic education and the psychological support to restart their lives.
They are children like any other, as we are learning, because we are getting this experience that they respond to kindness. Once they are shown this kindness, they are shown the caring, they also respond. And they are very easy from that point. But the most important thing is to have their views incorporated into the plans which are being made for their future resettlement.
The children in the worst situation, the most vulnerable and the most exploited, are probably domestic servants. Most are girls. In general, national laws governing child labour don't cover them. They're isolated behind closed doors, their lives controlled by adults who often treat them as little better than slaves.
I feel we servants are treated simply as slaves. I wonder if society really cares for us at all. How much do we count, we servants?
When I cook, I am told to wait until everybody finishes to eat. If food remains, I eat. If not, I sleep hungry.
When they go out, I'm always left behind because they say I have a big mouth. I feel so lonely.
My uncle brought me from the village because my mother died. He also died. I was left to myself, with no parents, no family.
They feel very bad. That is why the atmosphere was not
it was touchy because most of them were left very young babies. They are being brought up with another family. They can't have that love from their parents because their parents left them when they were very tiny.
These particular girls are lucky. Their employers have been persuaded to let them come to the centre. So they have a chance to enter a new world. They can discuss their problems, get some education, and learn new skills which will help them get better jobs.
10 minus 2 is equal to 8.
This center was established to implement the ILO IPEX program on elimination of child labor. So what we have here is a long-time strategy to eliminate child labor. And these children suffer a lot of harassment within these homes. All forms of abuses you can think of. Sexual abuse, mistreatment generally, harassment and beating. We want to provide these girls with better skills so that they can improve their lives.
Once a week, the girls in this educational centre in Bangkok meet for meditation and prayer. All have been either rescued from prostitution or were identified as children at risk. They are now part of a long-term government scheme to eradicate child prostitution in Thailand. A network of such centres has been set up around the country by the Labour and Social Affairs Ministries. They offer training to give the girls an alternative way to earn their living outside the sex trade. The courses are free. They include working in restaurants and hotels, as beauticians and hairdressers, or as dressmakers. The program also includes a strong emphasis on the moral values taught by Buddhism.
We consider that vocational training and skill training alone is not adequate for the social life today. So we try to apply the project of quality of life. One of the activities is the moral camp, religious concept into the daily routine life of the children.
Thailand is now facing up to the reality that the boom in tourism has also brought a boom in child prostitution. A beautiful daughter or son is regarded as a financial asset by many poor families. Some acknowledge that if the child is pretty, they go to the brothel. If ugly, into a sweatshop. Thailand's economic growth has been spectacular, but the social price of this new material wealth can be high. In the more organised sectors of the economy, progress against child labour is being made. A government labour inspection unit is visiting this construction site to check that no children under 15 are employed. Their approach relies more on persuasion than threats. The officials know that cracking down too hard won't help the poor who need the money their children earn to survive. The inspectors continue their work after dark, heading for the centre of Bangkok's sex trade, Patpong. But here they need an armed police escort. Even with protection, the officials can't do much against the pimps, recruiters and kidnap gangs who prey off the prostitutes and who make huge profits from the sex trade.
Inspection is certainly necessary, but far from sufficient. Much more is needed in education and training skills to prevent children going into prostitution.
think Thai government has finally come to accept that we have child labor problem. I would say 10 years ago, the government was reluctant to say that we do have child labor. Many small countries are afraid of their image, particularly developing countries are worrying about exposing their wounds to the public, to the world in general. You have to accept the problem so that we can begin with solving it. I think prostitution is just another kind of work for the children. It just happened to be the work that we don't want them to do because they're children. We don't want our children to be crippled in the minds and the bodies and the soul so early in life.
This is where one girl's story begins and ends. In a village of the Luau Hill tribe in North Thailand, Pai's life is being commemorated. She left aged 14, attracted by the bright lights of Bangkok. By 17, she was dead, having contracted the AIDS virus. Because these families are poor, because their skin is fair, and because their children follow a tradition of obedience, thousands of hill tribe girls have been sucked into prostitution. Mae Sai is in the heart of the Golden Triangle region, where Thailand meets Burma. Here, poor families with girl children are frequently approached by agents working for the sex industry. They comb the local villages, offering cash. The girls may think they're going to a factory or domestic service. In fact, their destination is a brothel. A group of local volunteers has got together to fight the sex traders. The Daughters Education Program, or DEP, is a grassroots response to the scourge of child prostitution. With the support of the ILO, the DEP has set up workshops across the Hill Tribes region. More than 400 girls are already receiving education and training to keep them out of the hands of the pimps.
These girls usually come from broken families. Their parents are drug addicts or suffer from AIDS. These children are the ideal prey for the agents. It's the agents or us. If it is us, we provide them with education, hoping that they get the opportunities for a healthier development.
Mali is one of those rescued by the centre. She now patrols the hill tribe villages, trying to arrive at the houses before the sex recruiters, to persuade the poor not to sell their children. In Bangkok, Putinan in Samram works for the same cause. As a former child labourer herself, she tries to stop others suffering in the same way.
This is how we try to help the children. Many of them come to Bangkok with no idea of what they may face. There are brokers and agents looming all around the station, waiting to recruit them. We want to warn them.
The government is also promoting its opposition to child labour and child prostitution, using dates like Children's Day to raise awareness by getting media attention.
During 5 years of my life, since I was 9, I was a child worker in a sweatshop in Bangkok. I had come from a very poor region, and my parents thought that I could get a better life in Bangkok. I worked day and night for very little or no pay. When I was in the factory, I felt sad. I thought that children had the right to study and play, but I didn't. Someone told me about the foundation, and I left the factory and decided to commit my life to other child workers.
Behind the exploitation of working children like Putinan is the crisis of rural poverty. Regions like this see little of the economic boom in Asia's cities. Sisaket province is the poorest area in Thailand. Faced with a lack of schooling and no job prospects, it's not surprising that many young people will take any opportunity to leave. Thailand's main answer to child labour is compulsory primary education. Along with legislation, it's considered by many to be the most important weapon governments can wield against child exploitation. With international help, school facilities in the countryside have been improved, with more teachers and more money for books and other aids. As a result, enrollment in both primary and high schools has increased dramatically in the last couple of years. Child labour issues have also been made part of the curriculum.
Child labour is intolerable. Some children die because of exploitation. Some are exposed to all sorts of polluting chemicals. This work results in bad health for them. Children should simply not work.
Our message to them is very clear. Children under 13 should be in school and not in the labour market. It's a problem of safety and health and a problem of dignity. Before the program, many children dreamed of going to Bangkok, and very few completed primary school. It isn't, and it won't be the case from now on. I am certain. We also try to reach out to the individual parents, to talk with them about the problems. We encourage them to consult with us about the future of their children. And they're responding well.
If you look in the history of England, way back last century, England also, in many countries, not only England, in Europe, in America, they always used education, particularly formal education, as a part of attracting or drawing the kids from the working place, so that they would be given more opportunity to further learning and learn alternative skills so that they would get better job, better employment placement, and so on and so forth. This is during even Charles Dickens' time. You may remember the story of the child labor, you know, the use of children in streets and so on. Well, we are just sort of at that level now, but with a little bit better condition.
In Brazil, a local radio station has taken up the fight. Radio Sisal has the largest audience in the northeast of the country. Noé Silvestre Carneiro, the president of the local branch of the Rural Workers Union, is using its programs to get across his message against child labor. He tells listeners that their children deserve better than a life working in the plantations. Send your children to school and let the union help with your problems, is the message. The union operates from small, ill-equipped offices in the town of Retirolandia, but its message is starting to get across. Years of drought in this region has badly affected the economy in what was already one of the poorest parts of Latin America. The only crop which has survived these conditions is sisal, which provides the raw fibre for rugs, ropes and coarse cloth. Child labour is a way of life here. Families need the money their children bring in. Thousands of children work in the factories, warehouses and plantations, although there's no shortage of unemployed adults to do the job. The children are cheaper, even though the conditions they work in, extremes of heat and dust, break almost every rule in the book.
A pessoa para trabalhar com sisal, acho que ela tem que ser uma pessoa bem forte. Vamos dizer assim, ela não uma pessoa desnutrida, ela não pode.
A person who works in the sisal fields has to be strong. Someone who is badly nourished can't work here. The dust gets into your lungs. And if the worker is weak, he will become seriously ill.
Já vai pro pulmão e a frequência dessa pessoa pegar uma doença pulmonar.
The work is dangerous, as well as unpleasant and badly paid. The machinery can crush a hand that is a fraction too slow. But subcontracting work to landless peasants is the new trend in these plantations. And the whole family has to work to make ends meet. Noe Carneiro tries to visit as many of these workers as he can, no matter how remote their fields. He wants to hear at first hand their problems and to try and propose practical solutions.
Nós temos o trabalho da criança muito perigoso na área do cinzal, na colheita, na hora de cortar o cinzal.
The situation for working children in this region is extremely dangerous. We have children who have been blinded because thorns from the sisal leaves went into their eyes. We have children who've lost a hand in the shredding machine. They work without any protective clothing, so the unions are very concerned. We're committed, not just here in Retirolandia, but all across the country, to rescue the children from this exploitation, to put them into good schools so that they can have a better future.
Para que essas crianças no futuro tenham uma vida melhor.
The union made this video to publicize the conditions and danger that child workers sometimes face.
Nós vimos que nem só o sindicato da nossa região, como todos os sindicatos.
We're calling on all unions to roll up their shirt sleeves and fight for the children, because children represent the future for Brazil.
É o futuro do nosso Brasil.
The charcoal burning yards of Brazil are some of the most miserable places to work anywhere in the world. These mud ovens are in Rio Pardo in the Mato Grosso region. The workforce makes charcoal for Brazil's steel plants. The workers migrated here with their entire families because of promises of steady work and good money. The work is never ending, and all hands down to the smallest child are needed. Conditions of life in such places epitomize the plight of millions of exploited children the world over. Do governments care? For child labourers like Eliana, who's 13, the charcoal yard offers the worst of all possible worlds. She's never been to school. Her childhood has been spent shifting logs, helping her father. Here, poverty speaks for itself.
My children work because they have to. What a question. We're poor. They can't read or write. Where else can they get a job? So they work here, even though it's awful.
Tem que ser num serviço assim bruto mesmo, né?
Not everyone has forgotten these people. A group of government representatives, human rights and church activists gathered under the National Forum for the Elimination of Child Labour is trying to improve conditions.
Vou falar com o senhor aqui só minuto. Eu sou Luiz Camargo, sou do Ministério Público. Nós estamos fazendo essa visita aqui para conhecer melhor a situação e até para combater esse tipo de exploração. Eu sou funcionário do Paulo Campos, não é isso? É. Carlos Marques. O senhor está registrado aqui?
Eu não.
Ele não registrou o senhor?
Não, porque eu cheguei agora de pouco, né?
É, o senhor está há pouco tempo?
Está com um mês e pouco eu tô aqui.
Eliana é sua filha?
É.
É? Com 13 anos ela.
É, tem outra ali com 17.
Está trabalhando com o senhor também? Tá. Todo mundo trabalha aí no processo de produção. Tem que ajudar o senhor. O que a Eliane faz?
Ela ajuda, não?
Então a gente espera que ele registre o senhor para que o senhor, pelo menos, o senhor tenha o direito ao fundo de garantia, ao INSS. E mais, que a gente possa tirar a Eliane daqui. Se a gente conseguir, se a gente tiver sucesso no nosso trabalho, a gente vai tirar a Eliane daqui e botar a Eliane numa escola. Eu não atribuo responsabilidade aos pais no sentido de estar explorando o filho. O pai,
I don't blame the parents for the fact that their children are being exploited. They need to make ends meet. Life is tough here.
A saída é dotar essas áreas, esses empreendimentos.
These areas need better services, better infrastructure. Sometimes the children are here because there's no alternative.
Nessas áreas, porque não tem outro lugar para ficar. E do lado do empresariado, dá ao trabalhador uma remuneração realmente
Regarding the
decente,
employers, they need to pay their adult workers decently, so that families aren't forced to put their children to work too.
At the National Forum's first conference, the problem of child labour in the charcoal yards was top of the agenda. The meeting brought together government officials, trade unions, human rights groups, as well as employers' organisations.
This is just a beginning, but we're committed to stopping children working in the charcoal ovens. Let's bring schools into the charcoal yards, with healthcare and dentists as well. We should call on employers to do their share. Whatever the Charcoal Producers Association can do, we'll do.
O ingresso precoce no mercado de trabalho está condenando milhões de brasileiros a viver para sempre na miséria. Se você é empresário, não dê emprego
a privately run employers group in Sao Paulo called A Brink that produced this video can take a lot of the credit for putting child labour on the mainstream political agenda in Brazil. It shows the importance of involving employers directly in social campaigns, side by side with trade unions and governments. The organisation produces videos and radio programmes and offers advice and information to employers throughout the country. A Brink is using 21st century communication methods to fight a centuries-old problem.
O programa Empresa Amiga da Criança tem forte componente de comunicação. A agência Liu Lara Propeg, uma parceira nossa
An important part of our program, Enterprise as the Friend of the Child, is media communication. We have an ambitious advertising program in the mass media. For example, this is Veja, the most popular Brazilian weekly.
O maior índice de leitores no Brasil publicou uma página dupla de dos nossos anúncios.
They run, free of charge, a double-page advertisement in which we call on employers to do something about the child labour problem. We also give them a telephone number, so they can get more information about our campaign.
In the national capital, Brasilia, social action moves to the rhythm of samba. Child labourers and street children from all over Brazil have come to this rally to publicise their grievances and lobby the government.
I'm so happy to be here, fighting for our rights. We want to stop laws just being words on paper. We want them to be realities, so that one day, street children and working children can live in freedom and harmony.
I'm thrilled. We all are. We're so excited to be here. People all across Brazil will now hear our message. We want education without discrimination.
The children received support from local civic and political leaders. But most important of all, Brazil's greatest national hero, Pelé the footballer, gave them his backing.
Tudo é possível. Eu, particularmente, quando era garoto, eu vendi jornal, eu vendia amendoim na estação, eu engraxei sapato, e naquela época eu achava que aquilo não podia mudar a minha vida. Eu morava em Bauru, minha família era uma família pobre, mas eu sempre acreditei. Agora, eu queria fazer uma pergunta a vocês aqui, do movimento. Vocês acreditam que possa mudar isso? Vocês acham que tem que mudar, não pode, tem que ter mais força. Vocês acreditam que nós podemos mudar de idade? É isso, acreditando, se vocês acreditam, aí nós podemos mudar.
The Brazilian government has formally promised to place the battle against child labour at the top of the political agenda. To reduce and eventually to abolish child labour is and has always been the primary responsibility of governments. But governments alone cannot achieve this. In Brazil, civil society, including children themselves, has mobilised to work with the government and to remind it of its responsibilities. Here, working and street children are taking no chances that their message won't get across. They're going right into the presidential palace. Their combat echoes the voices of the hundreds of millions of underage workers worldwide who want to be heard in the corridors of power everywhere.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. We're from the movement of street and working children. We want to thank you for listening to our proposal. It's very important for us to know how we can contribute to the future of our country, Brazil.
Mas protesto só não adianta. Nós temos que fazer coisas, e vocês têm feito muitas coisas.
Demonstrating is just one part of your campaign. Now is the time to do things. And you have done wonderful things. Now people here believe that things must be changed. So we are working in the Labour Ministry and in Parliament against child abuse and slave labour. We want to end child labour. We have committed ourselves to this.
Nós estamos dando uma atenção extremamente direta a todos esses problemas.
Il est en train de se créer actuellement une volonté politique qui n'existait pas.
What we're seeing today is that there's a new political willingness to fight child labor. And this is the basis upon which we can build to struggle against this scourge. You know, for too many years we took far too relaxed an approach. We thought that economic growth on its own, or fancy new legislation, would solve the problem. Well, they didn't.
L'expérience nous a montré que ce n'était pas le cas. Il faut, pour progresser
We now know that only an act of will, hard work and real commitment from governments and from all sectors of society will put an end to child labor. Only when we have that is there any real hope.
Mais également dans la société d'affronter ce problème difficile. À partir de là, tous les espoirs sont permis. Est-ce que l'on peut permettre
Can we tolerate that a child be reduced to slavery? Can we tolerate that a young girl falls into prostitution? Can we tolerate a child working in a coal mine? Can we tolerate children being exploited to pick sugarcane? Can we tolerate a little girl working from dawn to dusk as a domestic servant instead of going to school? It's a question of morality. I believe any society worthy of the name has a moral duty to eradicate this form of exploitation, of what is, after all, its real wealth, its children.
Sa vraie richesse, à savoir sa jeunesse.